I always feel very newsmanish when we do this. Top of the hour check-in, DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Good morning to you as we now go live across all the fruited plain of platforms. Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. Happy to be with you on video here today. And we've got a great show coming up for you in just a couple of moments as we look at everything going on with UGA. And we start to get a little bit excited. Actually, more than a little bit excited. We start to get very excited about Georgia and Oregon to kick off the season, and we're going to talk about that here in just a moment, including kind of an interesting statistical fact that, I don't know, maybe it's not easy to understand, but I do think it's kind of interesting. We'll tell you about that coming up in a moment, which I realize isn't the best sell job of all time, but you get the point that I'm kind of getting to. All right, so let's get a couple of comments here, and we will get ready to get rocking and rolling here in a moment. Cam Hasty says, perusing the Marlowe's menu, Jacob Yarbo and I might take the there you go. So Cam and Jacob says it's a 2.5-hour drive to get there, but they're going to come next Thursday, maybe. Well, when I tell you what I have to tell you later on this week, you may even be more excited about that there as well. So sure enough, I realize that people have got work and they got things to do and things like this, but we haven't been in a Marlowe's Tavern for a live event in quite some time. And a lot of folks have been asking when we're going to do that again. Well, the answer is right now. We're getting ready to do it. So this would be a very good time to be at one because we're going to have a blast. We're going to pull out all the stops for sure. Hemingway says he plans to be there too, so that's awesome. Cam Hasty says passing around the offering plate for a little gas money. We'll do a love offering for Cam here. You remember love offerings? We're going to do a love offering maybe. That's not bad. Stafford Square Dog says going to be at the Benz on Saturday for the game. He says, assuming my flight makes it on Friday night on time. And I know that's a little bit of a tricky situation right now. West GA Dog fan asking about the off-air conversations around high school football. Yeah, listen, I'm lucky to work with. I love working with Rusty, and obviously I was thrilled to work with Jeff Sintel on Saturday. And it's always fun kind of picking their brain about everything that's kind of going on with related to stuff like that. William Perry checks in to say long live the cocktail party. Appreciate that. All right, let's see. We get ready to get going here. Yeah, so really good stuff. So we're going to take more of your comments when we're done today as a part of our R.S. Andrews Cool Down. We appreciate you being here. And I'm going to share some audio today of a Georgia player from the other day that I think is really good. And I think it sort of speaks to maybe the disconnect that exists between some folks outside of our bubble of DawgNation and what those of us kind of inside the bubble of DawgNation kind of know. Some UGA players about to introduce themselves in a very big way to the rest of the country. We'll kind of give you a little bit of a thought on that today. Connor Riley, eyewitness account of what's been going on at UGA practice. I'm not sure how much I'm going to get into this, but there's actually kind of a juicy rumor out there related to one soon-to-be SEC team. I may kind of flirt with talking about this a little bit, although I don't know that I'll go all the way on that. But nonetheless, we'll do some of that before we're done. Our buddy Mad Dog's got a great golden shoe for us, so we are locked and loaded and ready to go, and happy to have you on board for it. It is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. And it begins right now.
Today's episode of DawgNation Daily is brought to you by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. Dial 678-ESOG now for a solution to your foundation and waterproofing problems.
Presented by DawgNation.com. This is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Here's your host, Brandon Adams.
Can I give you a fact to begin today's show? And this is one of those things where maybe you care about this, maybe you don't. It's only, I guess, partially interesting, but it sort of sets us up for where we want to go today. And it kind of involves some of those like fancy stat analytics things that you see sometimes. Are you familiar with the website 538.com? They kind of cover the analytics spectrum across the world, obviously in sports, but sometimes in politics and sometimes even in other sort of areas where data kind of matters. They're just sort of a statistical-based website, and for some of you, that's absolutely as boring as it sounds. But the point is they had a story the other day as it relates to college football. And we kind of think of college football as being a little bit of a top-heavy sport right now. And according to the guy that wrote this for 538, that college football, at least in terms of their modeling and their percentage chance of so-and-so winning the national championship, that college football has never been more top-heavy than it is right now. That if you take the two top three favorites, Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, the same three teams that you see rated in the top three of every poll, the two official polls, coaches, AP, and everything else, you know, the sort of way too early top 25s and just random dudes' opinion, whatever else. Those top 3 teams are across the board all over the place. That if you take the top 3 there, Bama, Ohio State, Georgia, for as far back as you want to go, the odds of one of those 3 teams winning the national championship has never been more concentrated than it is right now. That I think the overall number they have is around 70% chance that either Alabama, Georgia, or Ohio State wins the national championship for as long as they've kind of tracked this stuff, or far back as they want to go tracking the numbers. They've never seen this much national championship potential congregated in so few teams right there at the top. There's kind of a slight chance the number 4 team, number 5 team might win it. And then there's like a 10% chance that anybody else in the entire country beyond those top 5 teams wins the national championship. That is how top heavy college football is viewed to be right now. And the reason why this is kind of interesting, because while we may not care about the fancy stats and how they tabulate all this, we might not even really understand how they tabulate a lot of that kind of stuff. With our own eyes, we can sort of see that some version of that's probably true. That, if you're a betting person, are you really making a bet on like the 6th or 7th best team in the country right now to win the national championship? That doesn't really feel like a very wise thing to do necessarily. Or just in terms of what you watch on a Saturday in, Saturday out basis, it's pretty clear that, Bama and Georgia have kind of outpaced just about everybody. And Ohio State, while not in the playoff a year ago, is trying to do the same kind of thing this year. Even our own eye test sort of backs up what the calculator folks would say in terms of who has a chance to win the national championship and how little chance exists for almost anybody else. That just kind of backs up what we have with our own eyes. And here's the other thing that you probably also noticed as well, and this is definitely relevant for Georgia, who has a big Week 1 marquee game against the Oregon Ducks. Not only do you notice the idea that this sort of feels like it is true, I think you notice a lot of people openly wishing that it wouldn't be true. Openly wishing that it won't quite be quite so easy to predict, and the idea that if you're not a Bama fan or an Ohio State fan or a Georgia fan, there is just something pretty disappointing about the idea that we got 4 playoff spots and 3 of them have already been earned, and 2 of them are the exact same 2 teams that played for the national championship a year ago. That if you're like an Illinois fan or a Syracuse fan or an Arizona State fan, just a random college football fan that just sort of watches the sport, the notion that 3/4 of the playoff is already settled, that's a little bit unsettling or a little bit disappointing to think for a lot of folks. And that's why you see, I believe, from time to time, what almost feels like a little bit of a bias against Georgia, or a little bit of a, media motivation to talk up something other than Georgia, because Georgia won the national championship a year ago. Are they going to really crowd their way in and become kind of a twin pillar to Alabama? And are they going to really render the sport this boring? And that's what a lot of what Week 1 kind of is about against Oregon. It is a chance for the people who desperately want parity. It is a chance for the people who desperately want college football to have some mystery and some intrigue, for there to be a reason to watch week in, week out. It is a chance for those people to kind of get their wish if Oregon even plays Georgia close. Because if Oregon even comes out Week 1, 2 Saturdays from now, playing Georgia close, at least there's a little bit of a signal at that point in time, hey, maybe it won't be quite so easy for Georgia this year. Maybe they did lose too much off a national championship team a year ago. And if Notre Dame were to do the same thing with Ohio State Week 1, maybe there's a chance that's true. And Week 2, when Alabama goes to Texas, that's a weaker opponent than the other 2 I'm talking about, but it is a true road game for Alabama. Maybe that's kind of the case there, that maybe there are some big non-conference games in the beginning or near the beginning of the season that would make it more likely there could be a little parity when it comes to college football here this year. Of course, now if you're a Georgia fan, you're not worried about the overall health of the sport. You're not worried about what somebody sitting in Tulsa, Oklahoma does for entertainment. You want to see Georgia come out and render all of this a moot point. You want to see Georgia come out and do exactly this year what it did a year ago, which is drag the opponents that it plays up and down the field and be in kind of laugher games in the fourth quarter. You want Georgia to make it look just as easy this year as it did a year ago. You want to disappoint all those people who are hoping that this season finally provides a little bit of parity. And ultimately, that is what this upcoming, or I should say 2 Saturdays from now, is ultimately about. It is about Georgia's chance to demonstrate that no matter how much you hope they've been decimated by the 15 draft picks they've lost, no matter how much you hope they've been decimated by the 5 first-round picks they've lost on defense, and no matter how much you may hope that last year's offensive performance, where Georgia was actually 8th in the country in points scored per game, that somehow that ends up being smoke and mirrors, and Georgia actually isn't quite as good offensively this year as it was a year ago, that no matter how much some folks may hope that's true, not because they hate Georgia, just because they don't want to be bored, that no matter how much you hope all of that's true, the fact of the matter is Georgia's going to go out there and demonstrate that the new boss is the same as the old boss, that what Georgia did last season, close game against Clemson, then dominating everybody else for the entirety of the regular season, it might be ready to pick up here week 1 of the 2022 season doing the exact kind of thing. And if it does that, it's important to keep in mind that this is all part of, I don't want to say grand plan for Kirby Smart, but there is a reason that Georgia plays in the kinds of games it's playing in against Oregon, whether it be true road games, and Georgia's got some of those scheduled in the future. It went to Notre Dame in 2017, or the kind of neutral site stuff like being in Charlotte for Clemson a year ago, or Oregon right now, that Kirby Smart ultimately believes that great players want to play on great teams, and great teams prove themselves in really big games. It's a scheduling philosophy that works out great for us as fans because it makes the Georgia seasons, for those of us who love them, far more entertaining. And a marquee opponent like Oregon, a recognized uniform, some players that you've heard of, it's a chance for Georgia very early in the year to prove what it's all about for the upcoming season. And on Saturday, when Kirby Smart met with the media, he talked about this a little bit, that, hey, as long as he's got some control over this, knowing that you got to be ready for big games in the SEC, why not play a big game to get ready for what's coming for you after that? I love this scheduling philosophy from Kirby Smart, and I want you to hear this as a part of the conversation that we're having right now.
As far as scheduling philosophy, it's never changed for us. It's you look at it as if we make decisions right now for right now. Decisions made for this year and next year were made a long time ago. And it's always been my philosophy to go play a quality opponent, a Power 5 opponent, a big matchup. I don't care if it's home and home. I don't care if it's neutral site. Go play a good team, because I really believe that helps your team get better. And when you play in the SEC, you're going to run the gauntlet anyway. What's one more team playing a really tough physical team? We don't run from that at Georgia. I embrace that. Our fans want that. I want that. I think that generates a lot more excitement. I think you recruit off of that when you go and you get to sell opening the game and playing in big-time venues. So I think that's important. But as far as the philosophy with us playing more SEC games, if that happens, then so be it. It's not going to change our philosophy of what we do non-conference. We had already moved to that before the realignment and all the things going on. We were already trying to schedule 3 big games a year, and that's just the way we think it's best.
I think it's an interesting statement from Smart that he seemingly wants Georgia to play the toughest possible schedule it can play, including, as he said, they had this big pursuit for even more high-profile non-conference games. Georgia's supposed to travel to Oklahoma, for instance, next year. There's been some chatter that the game may not end up being played because of the potential changes, not even potential, the imminent changes to the SEC schedule. We don't quite yet know how the SEC schedule is going to change, but we know in the future it is going to change. And because of these impending changes, that the Georgia-Oklahoma game may become a casualty to all of that. However, I've been kind of, it's been indicated to me that Smart actually still wants to play at Oklahoma next season, even with all the uncertainty of what the future is going to look like. I've been told that Smart does not want to let go of that game, even if it does eventually end up not being played. That's how valuable Smart kind of sees the chance to play big games near the beginning of the season and to prove itself in non-conference play as much as Georgia has proven itself in SEC play over the last couple of years. That's what Smart loves to do. And that is what next Saturday provides the chance for. For all these folks who say, Georgia's just not going to quite be national championship level here this year. Well, the fact is, as 538 wrote, that's not what the fancy stat analytics seems to say. The fancy stat analytics seems to say that Georgia's right there with the Alabamas and the Ohio States as teams most likely to win the national championship, and the performance against the Ducks could be proof of that. And by the way, what's kind of cool about this time of year too is this is the time we kind of transition away from sort of preseason camp type talk of, depth chart and who's going to be the third string this and who's going to be the whatever that. And now you kind of, not that that's not important and not in its own way fun, but now you get into something that's even, I think, more fun than that, which is kind of really zeroing in on those true game prep type of things. I mean, a couple of weeks ago when Smart was asked about the week 1 game against Oregon, at that point in time, he totally begged off the question. Didn't want to talk about that at all. That was not something that he was willing to entertain at that point whatsoever. But on Saturday, all of a sudden, that's not quite such a distant topic anymore. All of a sudden on Saturday, getting a little bit more geared up to play the Ducks is something that he's going to acknowledge, yeah, they are doing. Coaches have been doing that. Now getting ready to present that game plan to players, we have finally reached the preparations for Georgia's first game, and Smart's words on Saturday provide an indication of that too.
No, we don't touch it just yet. I mean, we would be kind of reassessing our team and our roster, stacking the roster. We're going to look at some numbers and say, if we had to go on the road in the SEC, who are the 70, who are the 80, who are the 85, where those numbers fall, what are the decisions we got to make. If we're not taking that guy, then we're taking that guy. We got a lot of things to look at in the next day or two as the players get a little recovery time. We'll start working kind of coaches on Oregon in the next couple of days, but not with the players until later in the week. And we'll work on some future opponents we got before the off week in the coming days, just so we have a little bit of a history there when we get ready to play them.
So let me see if I can kind of sum all of this up as Georgia gets ready for Oregon 2 Saturdays from now. I think it provides a very important measuring stick for those of us that are just naturally curious about what Georgia's going to be. The truth is that once you get past Oregon, for many weeks, Georgia's not going to really be playing any kind of ranked opponent. This is a very manageable schedule, it would seem, on paper for Georgia this year. Sometimes certain games have a way of surprising you, but on paper, the best that we can tell, the Georgia regular season schedule is pretty manageable. Now, the downside of that is, for those of us who kind of want to find out what Georgia's all about, some of these week in, week out opponents that you'll be playing won't really provide you the opportunity to learn that because Georgia's going to dominate them even if they don't play particularly well. That's just going to be kind of the way that all of that goes. So all the more reason to see Georgia come out and send the message against Oregon because it's an indication to us that, hey, this Georgia team really may be on its way to being just as good as all of us hoped they would be. And to the folks outside the bubble of Dog Nation who are hoping for the opposite, who are hoping that this year's college football season isn't boring, this year's college football season has the chance for some mystery and the chance for some intrigue, and that maybe the national champions from a year ago are going to take a step back, Georgia can let it be known that no, you may want that to be true, but it's not true. Georgia is just as viable a contender in this year's season towards this year's national championship as it was a year ago when it brought the trophy home.
No, we don't touch.
My name's Brandon Adams, and this is DawgNation Daily, the daily podcast for Georgia Bulldogs fans. Good morning to you, and thanks for being with us. And a big thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making it all possible. Whether you join us at 9:45 for our 1st and 15 at DawgNation.com or on the DawgNation app, or after that 10 a.m., Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Twitch. We're happy to have you with us across all of our fruited plain of video platforms, podcast as well, Apple, Spotify, everything else. And for those of you that listen on the radio each and every day on Athens Sports Radio 960 The Ref, we certainly appreciate that there as well. And we have a huge thanks to our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia for making it all possible. You know, ESOG, a great sponsor for us because they've been longtime friends of ours here on DawgNation Daily, and I'm always so grateful for those of you that help support those that have supported us, and that's certainly what Jay and the entire team at Engineered Solutions of Georgia has been all about. They're also proud partners of UGA, and that's kind of cool to support those that are truly supporting the dogs, and that's Engineered Solutions of Georgia there as well. But it's what they can do for you that also matters a lot to me. I'm talking about foundation and waterproofing issues. Over the course of the next few days, we are slated to have a good bit of rain. And for some of you, the notion of rain brings a little bit of anxiety because you either are fearful that water is going to show up where it's not supposed to be, or you sort of know that water is going to show up where it's not supposed to be. You see the evidence of it all around you. Those wet spots in your garage, your basement, your crawl space, things like that. Well, that's what Engineered Solutions of Georgia exists to fix for you. They have an entire team of engineers on staff. That's something that nobody else in our market can say. They've got an entire team of resources devoted to solving your issues when it comes to your foundation, your waterproofing stuff. And you know the foundation things to look for there too. You see the cracks in your walls, or you see the start of what appears to be a crack in your walls. Well, that's another reason why you want to pick up the phone and simply dial 678-ESOG now. That's the great thing. Getting in contact with Engineered Solutions of Georgia is simply that easy. Just dial 678-ESOG now. And guess what? If you've got a small problem, they'll tell you that. They'll say, go to the hardware store and buy, whatever needs to be bought. But if it's something more substantial, if it's something that's going to require a little more work, all the more reason to lean on their expertise, the entire team of engineers they have. that can help you protect something that probably really matters to you, which is the structural integrity of your home. That's what it's all about. So our friends at Engineered Solutions of Georgia are all about that. So give them a call, 678-ESOG now. That is 678-ESOG now. All right, before we get Connor Riley here and do a Kroger Fresh Take with him, I want to go around the dog house with you for a couple of moments. And it's brought to you today by our friends at Georgia's Own Credit Union. Now, we kind of talked off the top of the show a little bit about this kind of disconnect that exists between Georgia fans who hope this season is as boring as possible, with Georgia just laying waste to everybody that plays, and kind of a larger perception nationally that maybe Georgia will do the rest of the country a favor and maybe it'll have the decency to regress a little bit and give somebody else a chance for a while. And they'll say the same thing to a degree about Ohio State and Alabama, but it's almost like that Georgia gets the brunt of this because Georgia's kind of the newcomer to the party. They're sort of like the new money in this discussion. You know, Alabama and Ohio State are kind of the old money, the sort of sophisticated society folks, and Georgia's kind of the party crasher here a little bit. So that there's this, sense that, hey, hopefully Georgia will have the decency to regress, to give somebody else a chance to feel like they're actually involved in the season. And for the people who really want that to be true, the one thing they keep zeroing in on is all that Georgia's lost from a year ago. And it's easy to understand why they would do that. It's not an insignificant topic. We would acknowledge that too. But what's amazing to me is that there is this large assumption on the part of non-Georgia fans, whether it be opposing fan or just like media person, that somehow the guys that Georgia has waiting to step in place of the guys who have left Georgia are somehow not Georgia caliber players. Have you noticed this? That no one seems to be all that, I guess, intuitive about the notion of, well, Georgia lost a Georgia caliber recruit to the NFL, but somehow they don't expect the guy that's stepping in is also a Georgia caliber recruit, somebody who came in with similar accolades to what the previous first round picks from last year's team kind of had. And I don't know there's any place on the Georgia roster where this is more true than at the inside linebacker spot. This may be the true epicenter, if you will, a little bit bigger word than maybe I should be using, but the true epicenter of the disconnect that exists between what Georgia fans know their team maybe brings to the table and what non-Georgia fans outside the bubble of DawgNation sort of hopes Georgia isn't bringing to the table for this upcoming season. And the departures. Nakobe Dean was the Butkus Award winner. Quay Walker was the first-round draft pick. Channing Tindall was the backup, who could have been a star on many other teams, but bided his time and became a major contributor towards Georgia's national championship a year ago. There is no doubt those are big losses for UGA, and there's no doubt that Georgia probably couldn't have gotten better play from its inside linebackers than it did a year ago. And so it is fair to ask, well, what is left after all three of those guys have moved on to the NFL? But what Georgia fans have gotten quite comfortable with is a guy like Jamon Dumas-Johnson. Now, I've told you before that even if Jamon Dumas-Johnson's the next Nakobe Dean or the next Roquan Smith, the odds are that probably does not happen for him until his third year on campus, which is not this year, that'd be next year. So I certainly don't want to oversell Pop, that they call him, as the next Roquan or the next Kobe, because even if that is true, you're talking about still sometime in the future where that really comes to fruition. But that doesn't mean that he's not already a good player. And to go along with guys like Xavier Sori and Smile Modern, who have gotten a lot of camp buzz, and guys like Tresman Marshall, who seem to be healthy now, that if you've gotten good play from those guys, then all of a sudden that's helped you plug a hole that legitimately you really do have. And in addition to just being a capable performer on the field, Jamon Dumas-Johnson seems also poised to step up as a leader as well. I thought he had a very interesting press conference the other day, towards the end of last week, just kind of meeting with the media. And one of the things that he kind of discussed there for a moment is both stepping into the role from those departed leaders who have now moved on to the NFL and what he learned from these guys. So here's a reason why UGA fans are a little more comfortable with their situation in 2022 than some folks outside the bubble of DawgNation think they probably should be, because of the degree to which Georgia fans think they've already learned a lot about Jamon Dumas-Johnson, including stuff from this press conference from last week. Take a listen to this.
I feel great stepping in. I think them guys that left last year did a great job helping me and leading me to fulfill them roles. And my goals this year is just to be the best that we can be this season, not just me but the whole team, and keep the same Georgia standard as if they never left.
What's the biggest thing you learned playing behind Nakobe next year?
IQ. And Nakobe's a smart guy, but I didn't just learn from the Kobe. I learned from Quay. I learned from all of them. And I took pieces from each of their game and molded in my game.
Isn't that great? Talk about what he learned from those guys who are no longer here and the pieces from this. I took a piece from Quay Walker, a piece from Nakobe Dean, a piece from Channing Tindall, and that's how I'm molding my game. Can you imagine what the Frankenstein's monster of a little bit of Quay Walker and a little bit of Nakobe Dean, a little bit of Channing Tindall would look like? Can you imagine that? And I know he's speaking figuratively when he says that, but it does kind of get your imagination running wild a little bit, doesn't it? And this is what it's all about for Georgia fans. They like what a guy like Javon Dumas-Johnson brings to the table, and they think that everybody in the country is going to soon be aware of exactly what the guy they call Pop is all about. And he's not the only example, but he may be the best example of, you think Georgia lost all these great players, but Georgia's got Georgia-level players ready to step in place of them. And as I mentioned a moment ago, next Saturday against Oregon will be the perfect chance to demonstrate just how true this is to the entire country, who you know is going to be tuned in there that day. That's Around the Doghouse. It's presented today by our friends at Georgia's Own Credit Union. And listen, Georgia's Own's got a great thing for you right now as you're moving into a fall time of year where you're kind of traveling a lot, you're going to games, you're getting ready to start buying some gifts and some things like that. Well, as you move to this time of year, maybe nothing more convenient for you to take with you than one of those Visa Signature and Platinum cards from our friends at Georgia's Own Credit Union. They are a great way to take care and purchase all the things that you're doing on a regular basis anyway. You can earn flex rewards on these that can be used for basically anything. That's one of the cool things about having the Visa Signature and Platinum card. It's the incentives you get for using it. I'm talking about gift cards, cash back, travel, merchandise. You can also earn up to $150 when you open a new Platinum or Signature card. And there are some restrictions that apply, so you want to find out more and you want to apply here today at georgiasown.org. That's the website, georgiasown.org. Great to have Georgia's Own Credit Union as a part of Around the Doghouse here today. All right, so we've got a lot coming up. Let me just tell you this really quickly before we bring on Connor Riley. So on Thursday, I'll remind you this again before the show's done, but on Thursday, that's 2 days from now, today's Tuesday, 2 days from now, we have very special guest that's going to join us, and we have a very big announcement we're going to make. So we are looking forward so much to all the cool things we have going on as we get ready to kick off the 2022 season. And some of that we can allow you to be made aware of coming up on Thursday. So 2 days from now, special guest, big announcement. We'll look forward to doing that then. So I hope you'll tune in with us for all of that. But for now, Georgia suffered a pretty significant injury. We'll find out more about kind of the aftermath of that, some observations for what's been going on at UGA practice, and those preparations beginning in earnest for the Oregon Ducks. Let's do all of that right now. Kroger Fresh Take with Connor Riley here on DawgNation Daily today.
From Athens and across the SEC or wherever the recruiting trail may lead, here's a DawgNation.com insider.
Well, welcome in Connor Riley here as part of a Kroger Fresh Take here today. And unfortunately, the big news has been related to the Andrew Paul injury. So let's do the bad stuff, Connor, before we get to the good, the more fun stuff. And I'm curious your perspective on all this, because I think the sense that I've gotten from folks like you who are at Georgia practice more frequently than I am is that Paul was having a good camp and was going to be a contributor for Georgia's running back depth prior to this injury. It sort of seems like to me that, hey, maybe Georgia doesn't quite have as many, total bodies in that running back room as you sort of wish they do if you were a UGA fan. But if you can keep your top end performers healthy, then you may still have, quite a lot going for you at the running back spot here this year that, maybe you'll envy some other folks in terms of the total number of backs they have available, but they might envy you in terms of the potential bell cow like Kenny McIntosh and guys like Dajon Edwards and a when healthy Kendall Milton, who can certainly help, certainly fill the void here that Georgia needs that running back spot. What is your perspective on all of this?
Yeah, first, I said the big news is that special guest we've got coming on Thursday.
There you go.
I don't often hear an introduction like that, but
sure.
I've gone back and forth on this. Andrew Paul was having a good camp. I think we can say that, especially given the expectations of him coming in as a summer arrival. He was ahead of Branson Robinson in terms of development, in terms of where they had both shown they were, but he was still Georgia's fourth string running back, and he was not ahead of Dajon Edwards. I think Dajon Edwards is still going to play a significant role, probably even a more significant role now, and I'm really interested in seeing what he looks like there. I do think the larger point you make, though, there is long-term depth, season-long depth, because you really only have to look at Alabama last year. From, they started the year, I believe, 5 scholarship running backs, and by the end of the year, They were down to two, Brian Robinson and Trey Sanders, and Brian Robinson was not 100% at the end of the season because they had to ride him so heavily because so many of their guys had gotten injured there at the position. And so you can easily see that scenario folding out. I think this is probably the point, as I wrote this morning. Kenny McIntosh, if you're making a list of the 5 best guys who've had the 5 best camps, he's on it. And I think he's pretty clearly established himself as the number 1 running back, perhaps in a way that Georgia hasn't had maybe since DeAndre Swift last year at Georgia here, where he is, in my opinion, head and shoulders above what Georgia has in that running back room right now. I think Kendall Milton is very much a question mark in terms of, what are you going to get out of him for a full season? He's going to have good games. There are games where he's going to be healthy, but I don't know how, when you look at his injury history to this point, and then he has the hamstring injury this fall already, how you can rely on him to be a full season contributor. And I think when you add that in to losing Andrew Paul for the season, a promising running back, no doubt, I think it's in conjunction with those two that you start to get worried long-term about this running back depth.
Yeah, I think you and I are on the same page on this. I talked a little bit about this yesterday, that DeAndre Swift in 2019 had nearly 200 carries. I think it was 196. It was right there at 200. And when Kirby Smart this past Saturday follows up his pretty effusive praise of Kenny McIntosh with a very similar statement again, Connor, I'm a fan, you know that. I'm going to speak as a fan for a moment. If the guy that Kirby's talked about the last 2 Saturdays had to get 200 carries for the Dogs, I think I'm probably fine with that. I am very, very eager to see what Kenny McIntosh brings to the table here this fall. I think it's been, you call it one of the top 5 stories. I think that's definitely true. I've been very intrigued by the degree to which that Smart has praised McIntosh when asked about him directly. This seems like a pretty interesting development for UGA, just kind of based on Kirby's sort of typical way of sidestepping a lot of this kind of stuff. He seems very willing to promote McIntosh at the moment, and I take that to mean something.
Yeah, and I first sort of noticed, Del McGee, when we spoke to him a few weeks ago, he also brought up that DeAndre Swift comparison there in terms of pass catching ability. And as I wrote this morning, that Kenny McIntosh, I think, has been a good bit more durable than DeAndre Swift. Now, obviously, Kenny hasn't had the workload that DeAndre has, but that 2019 season, going into that LSU game, DeAndre Swift had 193 carries, and he had picked up an injury in the Georgia Tech game, and he finished the year with only 3 carries in Georgia's last 2 games. So if he had, sort of been at that healthy mark, he would have, I think, blown past that 200-yard mark. And so I found it interesting when Kirby spoke about Kenny again this weekend. He talked about the importance of him maintaining weight and being in that 205 to 210 range there. And I do think that, that's going to be something important this season to follow now that I think clearly see Kenny McIntosh as RB1, is how do they go about managing him and maximizing what he is able to give them? Because I think he's clearly outperformed this fall what I think many predicted that he might be able to give Georgia this year. I think he's clearly going to give more than that. The question of how do you get the most out of him while also making sure he is still fresh enough to make an impact there at the end of the season in those big games against, say, Alabama or Ohio State in the college football playoff.
Moving on to kind of some of what's been going on at practice, the best that I can tell, and you kind of alluded to this last week, it seems like this is coming true, that Kamari Lassiter is on the verge of, or has already won that cornerback spot opposite Keely Ringo. And I guess the degree to which this has happened kind of makes me feel more confident in Lassiter in the fact that he seems to have had a really strong camp, and he kind of put himself at the forefront here. He certainly played his way into this position, which I think if you're a UGA fan, you take as good news. I think the fact that Tate Ratledge seems a little healthier now than he did a week ago, I take that as pretty good news, I think. What else is kind of standing out to you? I would say the inside linebacker spot opposite Jamon Dumas-Johnson seems like there's some positive developments there too. What are your kind of, I guess, sort of standout thoughts, having seen some practice, having talked to some people who seeing more of it than maybe we have? Kind of what are your kind of camp thoughts here at the moment?
Yeah, I think one on Kamari Lassiter, I think maybe the biggest thing that should inspire confidence about what he's able to give is Nolly Green's had a pretty good camp, and he made a real push there opposite Kamari Lassiter, and Lassiter did what I think you want players to do and rise and elevate to the moment, and he's very clearly done that so far this fall there. And so I do think, again, referencing, if you're making a list of top 5 camp standouts, I think Kamari Lassiter has to be on it there as well. I think there are 2, I sort of touched on this last week in a longer sort of notebook story that I wrote. There are two freshmen that are really interesting to me because of the way and the versatility that they have been used so far, and I think are going to be used this season. That would be Malachi Starks on the defensive side of the ball and Oscar Delp on the offensive side. I'll start with Delp. That tight end room is very talented, and I don't know how many snaps he's going to see as a true put his hand down in the dirt tight end this year, but I know they really like what he gives them as a wide receiver, and it wouldn't surprise me in the slightest with his size and speed capabilities to see that Georgia move him around, try and get him out in space and get creative with how they use him. And by all accounts, he's had a very strong camp there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, Dan Jackson's still starting the Oregon game. Dan Jackson is going to be an important player in the secondary this year. But this Georgia staff is trying to throw everything they can at Malachi Starks because they know later on in the year they're going to need him, and they're going to need him to be a big-time player in this secondary. And it sounds like, after a slow start to camp, he is sort of starting to pick it up there. And so while these guys, what their role looks like against Oregon, I don't know yet, and I don't know how big it is. But I've been very encouraged by the later stage camp development of those two freshmen, two guys that I think are going to play a pretty big role for Georgia this season.
So I think I told you this, maybe I didn't, but when I was at practice the other day for just like that, brief window you get to watch it, having not seen any practices prior to that, to me, Oscar Delp was the visually most impressive thing that I watched because I specifically watched the pass catchers. I was trying to watch the wide receivers, but as you know, Connor, when you sort of work these tight ends in that same drill, it's kind of just sort of a play polish quarterback throwing to pass catcher type drill. You can't take your eyes off the tight ends because they're just so awe-inspiring, watching how big he is and, Gilbert for his own reasons and, Bowers because of how he runs. But seeing number 4, he just looks so good in a uniform. And it's crazy to think that might be Georgia's number 4 tight end, or it's crazy to think that he's kind of among a group of impressive freshmen on the Georgia roster because on a different team in a different situation, he might be the only thing anybody's talking about. Like it's just amazing how even on a field full of kind of impressive guys, he already looks the part even though he hasn't played his first college game yet. Now, the drill I'm watching is not any kind of like amazing thing. It has, it's just more about the look that he gives off, where your eyes are kind of drawn to a guy that's already filling out that uniform pretty well, despite the fact that he was in high school like 5 minutes ago.
Yeah, 90% of the teams in the country, Oscar Delp would be the first guy off the bus. He is that physically impressive. He, I think, is a really promising young player, and like the fact that you have Darnell, Arik, Brock, and then you have Brock Bowers and Oscar Delp for multiple years there at that tight end position. You see, I think there's obviously a lot of optimism about the Georgia tight end position this season, but I mean, they're going to be, I think, even better in the future with, depending on what Darnell is able to give them this year and how Oscar Delp goes about developing. One other guy that I do want to shout out that is a freshman who, I don't know what his role looks like this season because his position is fairly loaded like the tight end one. Darius Smith is going to be a player. That guy is long. That guy is athletic. That guy might be first guy off the bus for Georgia one day as well. And so I think with this, this incoming freshman class, I know there's been a good amount of hand-wringing about, where is this national title recruiting bump? When are they going to start, recruiting at the level, say, Alabama is? I look out there and I look at and see some of these freshmen and the guys that Georgia is bringing in. It's hard to imagine that teams are going out there bringing in more physically impressive players than what Georgia has done in this recruiting class already.
I want to talk about Oregon coming up in a moment. Let me do one more thing kind of on this topic before we get there. And you talked about Malachi Starks a moment ago, and the sense that I get, Connor, as I'm guessing you've probably had enough fan interaction where you're kind of getting some of this too, is that Dan Jackson is going to be a very polarizing figure for this Georgia team here this year at the safety spot. He's going to be playing, and he may very well be starting, obviously, against Oregon next Saturday. And for some people, this represents a really cool story. I'm a little bit of a Dan Jackson homer because he's from my he's from Hall County. I'm from Hall County, so I got a little bit of a Hall County homerism thing going on there with him a little bit. But I also think that he's done a good job for UGA. And there are other people who are like, oh, you can't have a walk-on safety, playing for a team that wants to try to win a national championship. And I guess my response to all that, Connor, is that if Malachi Starks is supposed to overtake him, eventually that will happen. Or if a Tyke Smith were to get healthy and it'd be him, or whatever name that you want to mention, even Shakur Thomas, if you want to have him in that conversation, that if someone's supposed to overtake Dan Jackson, eventually they will. And honestly, in the case of Malachi Starks, I do believe that he's probably going to be too good to keep off the field. Certainly when the games start mattering the most, late in the year, and kind of that sort of November turning into December time of the year, my guess is Starks is probably playing a lot. But I already sort of get the sense that from some fans, there's almost a little too much being made of Dan Jackson right now because of his status as a walk-on. Do you get the same kind of vibe going on there with that at the moment?
It's Stetson Bennett all over again. Dan Jackson does nothing wrong. He goes out there and he does the best he can. He's blocked punts before. And Brandon, what was the most consequential play of Georgia's season last year?
It would have been the Keely Ringo interception return for a touchdown.
And correct me if I'm wrong, Dan Jackson was on the field on that play, correct?
He was more than on the field on that play.
Yeah, so we know that Dan Jackson can play, and Georgia is willing to count on Dan Jackson in the biggest of moments there. And he's gotten better this offseason. I've heard very good things about how well he is testing athletically and what he is going to be able to do. He might not be Richard LeCount, J.R. Reed, Lewis Dean, Georgia's long line of great safeties, but he's very clearly going to be a player and quite frankly, someone in college football that we should celebrate, a guy who was a walk-on who simply just by hard work and just busting his tail in both the classroom and on the football field has carved out a very nice role for himself in on a national championship contending team. And I mean, look, it's not his fault that a bunch of safeties have transferred out because they were concerned about playing time. And sure, if Malachi Starks ends up being all that Georgia thinks he can be, maybe he does end up passing him. So that's on Malachi Starks to make the improvements to exceed what Dan Jackson has done. It is no fault of Dan Jackson that he was not a 5-star recruit coming out of high school. And so I think anything that you were able to get out of him, and I do think he can be a very useful player for this defense this year, should absolutely be celebrated.
And then very quickly, because I want to change the subject, my Starks, whatever you want to call it, antenna is sky high right now. I really do think there's a chance that he's one of the special ones to come through here. And that's putting a lot on a guy that hasn't played. I think eventually he's, going to be a big, time player on this team this season. But I've got no problem with Dan Jackson against Oregon. I've got no problem with that whatsoever to give Starks a chance to kind of grow into what I truly think he'll be sooner rather than later.
Yeah, and I think one thing that gets a little glossed over when it comes to Malachi Starks, it's the first time in his life that he's really focusing and just playing safety.
Yeah.
When he was at Jefferson High School, he was playing both sides of the ball. He was playing linebacker for them. He was doing a lot of different things for them. And at that safety position, I think maybe more than anything else, a lot of it is instincts and just being able to trust yourself in what you're doing. When you're playing a position like that for the first time, much less at a greater competition level than you had in high school, there's going to be some growing pains and some learning curves there. And so I think the important thing, especially with the 5-star ranking that he came in with, people are going to be very eager to see how he performs and how he plays. Patience is, I think, the name of the game when it comes to Malachi Starks this season. I think eventually he does get on the field and does so in a big way for Georgia, but you don't want to put him out there before he's too ready and too green and thus second-guessing himself just because he has outrageous athletic tools.
All right, Connor, good stuff. I want to ask about the Oregon game coming up in a moment. Before that, though, let me remind folks, this is our Kroger Fresh Take here on DawgNation Daily here today. And, of course, one of the things we've been telling you about for a while there is going to KrogerChefJr.com and taking advantage a couple times a month. It becomes available for you. It's a chance for your kids to get a chance to make a really cool menu item and be a part of the food preparation process, learning about that, but also taste some good food there in the process. Just get them more excited sometimes about eating healthier foods when they're actually the ones that get a chance to cook that. And it's $7 per child. And if you go to KrogerChefJr.com, you can find out about some great opportunities to experience this coming up in the month of September, which is always a really fun thing. And by the way, one more chance to do this here for the month of August there as well, coming up on August the 27th, this upcoming Saturday. You get a chance to be a part of that. KrogerChefJr.com. The fruit pizza, you can do that, as I said before, just $7 per child. And for doing so, your child's going to get an apron and a patch, a chef's hat, a recipe card and box, also a pizza cutter. So check out KrogerChefJr.com for a lot more on that. So, Connor, Oregon prep, I think it's starting to begin. Kirby Smart obviously alluded to some of that on Saturday, and I love this time of year when you really do kind of get into not sort of preseason talk, but actual in-season talk. It sort of feels like we're there now. And the point that I made before our show began today is the Oregon game for Georgia is a great chance to sort of send that message that for all the people who are hoping for parity, for all the people who are hoping that, hey, maybe Georgia does regress just to kind of make the conversation around college football a little more interesting, I think that Georgia has a chance this 2 Saturdays from now to sort of ruin some people's fall and remind them that things haven't changed as much as you hoped that they would, and there may be some new faces and some new places, but this is essentially still Georgia against Oregon 2 weeks from now. That's sort of what I think it's about there for the Dogs. Kind of where are you at right now on, Georgia versus Oregon here coming up in a couple Saturdays?
Yeah, BA, I'll indulge you with a Star Wars reference here. I think this is going to be Return of the Jedi, and the Rebels realize, oh, wait a minute, the Death Star is operational. We're in big trouble here. Yeah. And it's a trap, to quote the great Admiral Akbar.
Very good.
And I think this is a Georgia team that, yes, winning the national championship was the end-all, be-all, and obviously Georgia's gone out and accomplished that. But this is what Kirby Smart was always building to. It wasn't to be a one-year team, a team where all the stars align perfectly and Georgia wins the national title. It's going to be, we lost some talent from last year, but we're still so loaded and we still develop so well. We're going to be one of the 5 best teams on a year-in, year-out basis. And, you're going to need some breaks to go your way over the course of said season, just like Georgia is last year and just like Georgia will once again need this year. But I think it's indisputable that at the start of this season that Georgia's one of the 5 and probably even 3 best teams in the country. And I think they're really eager to go out there and show, hey, we lost a lot of talent off of last year's team, but we're just as good, and it maybe in some areas, if not better this year than what we showed a year ago. And I think this Oregon team, a team that is talented, a team that could very well win the Pac-12, but a team that Georgia is, I think, a good bit better than and will be eager to show it on September 3rd in Mercedes-Benz Stadium.
And not only do I think that's a good message to send to the rest of the country, and as a Georgia fan, I like the idea of doing that, Connor, I'll also acknowledge that I think the Georgia fans themselves need something from this game too, because after the Oregon game, it's a long time before Georgia has any measuring stick game whatsoever. In fact, there's a chance there isn't a measuring stick game in the rest of the regular season. That's a long time to have to wait to wonder, well, how good is my team really if they're winning a game 37-0, but should they be winning it 57-0? Like, it's one of those things where for some Georgia fans, they'll be left to wonder how good their team really is. Well, against this Oregon team, in Mercedes-Benz Stadium, if Georgia goes out there and flexes a little bit, then I think it can be a source of comfort for UGA fans as they go through what might be a little bit of a lackluster regular season just because of how big of a favorite Georgia may be on most Saturdays, that, oh yeah, I did see something week 1 that gives me an idea of how good this team really may be come December, because there may be some regular season Saturdays after the Oregon game where you don't get a lot of usable data because of just how dominant Georgia might be.
And I'll say this as well. Obviously a lot of this fan base is still basking in and celebrating last year's national championship. But I think what a big win against Oregon will do will sort of reawaken them and be like, hey, last year was fantastic, an all-time year. Like, can't be tops. Let's go out there and let's do it again. Let's have fun. Let's dominate college football again and show that we're one of the best teams in the country. Yeah. And we're going to do that against an Oregon team that is maybe the toast of the Pac-12 and a team where if things go right for them, a potential college football playoff contender. Let's say that, hey, we lost 5 first-round defensive draft picks. We lost our defensive coordinator. And we're going to come out and we're going to be just as good as we were last year in some areas. And I think the eagerness to see that, and Georgia goes out there and shows that and makes maybe a statement against Oregon there in the first game, not necessarily saying it's going to happen, but if that does, I think there's going to be a lot of excitement about what this team can do and how it can look this season, given all that 2021 team meant to so many different people.
And very quickly before I let you go, flipping it, I have to admit, this is not a game that I think should be close. If it is close, even if Georgia wins, then Connor, that's probably a little bit, and Michael Carville, our producer, puts up my previous prediction on this that I'm calling for a Georgia shutout. But I do like the team total under for Oregon there that day. That's not a blowhardy thing to say. But nonetheless, if it is a close game, if Georgia wins, but it's not exactly very impressive, this is the kind of spot where Georgia shouldn't be kicking a field goal late to win. It shouldn't be winning by 7 points. And if it does, and that's probably a little bit of a message that maybe there are some growing pains here, and that the transition from national championship year to some new look guys on defense or whatever else, then maybe there is something to some of that kind of stuff. That if Georgia doesn't play well, you have to sort of call it what it is, which is a real missed opportunity to prove that you've turned the page.
Yeah, I think that's a great way of putting it. Georgia has a chance to go out there and make a statement in that first game there, and maybe in a way, a lot of national media folks may not be expecting. This is a 3:30 game instead of, a later kickoff. They gave that to Notre Dame, Ohio State, which is certainly understandable given the size of those two brands. But, I think so many people out there assume that, Georgia's going to take a step back this year because they won a title last year. It's the first time in 41 years. They're going to overindulge themselves and not be quite the same level of team. And I do think that Kirby Smart in particular relishes this opportunity here because he knows as he continues building this thing out and Georgia keeps going to playoffs and maybe wins another championship, 2, 3, 4, however many they do win, they're not going to have this chance to be counted as an underdog or to be counted out, so to speak, from a national perspective, a whole lot longer. And I think if you're a coach, you can absolutely use that and build off of that. And so I'm really interested in seeing how this Georgia team comes out and has a chance to really make this first statement this opening week of the 2022 season against one of what I still think is one of the better teams in the country from a total standpoint in Oregon.
Connor, great stuff. Thanks for being here as part of our Kroger Fresh Take here today. I know you've got some great stuff coming at DawgNation.com too. We'll look forward to reading that and, of course, seeing you back here on DawgNation Daily again very soon as well.
Yep, as always, was a pleasure, BA.
Good stuff.
Let's take a look around the rest of the league. This is SEC Through.
Yeah, I think one of the most appropriate things you can do is set the right level of expectation. In other words, for Georgia this year, even though they lost a bunch of guys off a national championship team, this isn't, hey, be happy about winning the SEC East. That's not what it is based on what we think we understand on paper right now about this team. Now, who knows how things happen over the course of a year, and maybe some new data would come in and some circumstances unforeseen might occur, and all of a sudden maybe you might kind of reconsider what it means to just win the SEC East. But Georgia, from a season-long expectation standpoint, a sort of a season-in goal standpoint, no reason this year should be any different than last year. And when teams that have national championship aspirations from the SEC play in Week 1 neutral site non-conference games, the SEC team typically dominates in those moments. Georgia's playing in its home state, in a stadium that it knows very well. Oregon is a Pac-12 team traveling west to east. Historically, that hasn't gone very well. Now, they did win at Ohio State a year ago, but that sort of tells me about what Ohio State wasn't more so than what Oregon was. This is the kind of game that Georgia should dominate. The 18-point number seems about right, if not, liking Georgia minus those points there in that instance. The other day, Bo Nix said something, assuming he's going to be the starting quarterback, that kind of got some attention about how that they were comfortable treating this as a true road game or whatever that he said. Everybody sort of makes a big deal about everything these days, and that kind of had sort of a big deal, made about it. But I sort of got the thing that Nix was kind of saying about that of, hey, is this a bowl game or is this a road game? Well, when you're playing in somebody else's state, when the crowd's going to be, 80-20 red and black as opposed to green and gold, at that point in time, then no, you're in a road game mindset. You are treating this as if you're traveling into a hostile territory. This is not a, bowl game. This is not a Oklahoma, Texas, Georgia, Florida style neutral site affair. This is true hostile territory. Oregon approaching it as such. And so Georgia, that's got every advantage in this game, it ought to dominate Oregon. If it doesn't, then you sort of have to call that what it is, which is maybe more reason for concern than right now we think should reasonably exist around UGA. That's just trying to set the right expectation for the game in terms of what success would really be. We'll talk more about the Dogs and the Ducks, of course, as we get closer. For now, let's get ready to go cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And let's get ready to start getting you going on your either first Royal Caribbean cruise vacation or maybe your next Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. You already know this is a great time to do that. It's so much fun to see the ships on the seas. And, for me, I'm kind of a big ship guy. I just like being on what you call like the Oasis class of ship. There's various classes of ships, and they're kind of named after one of the ships in that class. The Oasis class, really the largest class of ships in the fleet for Royal Caribbean. And I like the Oasis class because there's got so much stuff to do. If you're watching a video, you see the flow rider on the back of the ship. You see all the cool things that exist for kids. You see, the rock climbing wall. You got the great, collection of bars and lounges, and you go ice skating on a cruise ship. Can you believe that? Like that's the kind of entertainment that's available to you when you take advantage of, what happens on board a Royal Caribbean cruise ship. Now, listen, you could hear me talk about it, and I think you should take my word for it. But I want you to have a conversation with somebody who's really adept at helping you get like the right Royal Caribbean cruise vacation for you. Maybe the ship that I love isn't perfect for you, but there is a ship that is perfect for you. My friend Jessica Slater can help you out with that. She's with Dream Vacations, and she's like a Royal Caribbean expert. She's sent so many people on Royal Caribbean cruise vacations, and not only is she going to get you the best Royal Caribbean experience, but she's going to give you all the insight you need, but to get the most out of that experience. So give her a call, 770-718-9147. I'll read it again, 770-718-9147. You can also find her online, dreamvacations.com/jslater. That's dreamvacations.com/jslater. Jessica is just the best, and she's going to help you get a great Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. She helped me book my Royal Caribbean cruise vacation. So that's how much I love Jessica, and she's going to help you there as well. So make sure you check her out today. All right. I saw Paul Feinbaum the other day. He was on one of the radio interviews that he does. And he was talking about Jimbo Fisher, the Texas A&M coach. And he said of Jimbo that Jimbo is the SEC coach this season under the most pressure for the upcoming season. And I got to tell you, I don't agree with that at all. And I think it speaks to a huge disconnect that I believe exists related to kind of how some people perceive Fisher and how that those closest to him, those Aggie fans there in College Station, how they perceive their guy. I got to tell you, this is not dissimilar to the disconnect that probably existed prior to last year between Kirby Smart, Georgia fans' view of him, and folks outside the bubble of Dog Nation, how they viewed Kirby Smart. Now, that's not the same thing as saying that I think that Fisher's going to eventually travel the same path and win a national championship at Texas A&M. I don't know if he'll do that or not. But I do think that Texas A&M fans are far more willing to be patient with Jimbo than some of the media types are. I think that much the same way that a year ago you heard a lot of folks trying to push well, if Kirby Smart don't win a national championship now, when is he going to do it? Like, that sort of pushing that sort of now or never narrative around Kirby Smart, and that seemed ridiculous to us. We called that out at the moment. I think there's this thought around the same thing with Texas A&M this year of, well, you got to win right now. You just had the number one class in the country a year ago. But the truth is, Aggies fans are a little smarter than that, I think. I think they know that the return on investment from a number one recruiting class is not immediate. Georgia's first number one class came in 2018. Georgia's national championship came in 2021. That's, it's not an immediate one-for-one breakthrough, one compared to the other. Here's the other thing that I think that Aggies fans kind of also understand. I don't think you can easily describe the nature of the rebuild that Jimbo Fisher had to undertake at Texas A&M. Texas A&M was a pillow-soft Big 12-style program, and that's simply not going to work in the SEC. You may be fun to watch for a game or two, and you may have a guy like Kevin Sumlin and a quarterback like Johnny Manziel, and you may shock the world and upset Alabama, but it's never going to matter for very much. That you've got to build lines of scrimmage, you've got to build defense, you've got to build running game, and you've got to pair quarterback with that if you want to win it all. And in a roundabout way, it's sort of easier to catch lightning in a bottle and find a quarterback than it is to sort of build the program in all those other areas. But that is what Jimbo Fisher has kind of done. And it's one of the reasons why I think that Jimbo is actually doing a pretty good job at A&M, despite the fact that he gets a lot of grief and he's kind of like the source of a lot of controversy seemingly. But if you really watch what's happening at Texas A&M, they're actually, I think, pretty confident in what Fisher may eventually be able to do, and they're not going to be tricked into accelerating the timeline in which he's supposed to succeed, much the same way that Georgia fans a year ago weren't going to be kind of caught off guard by that. If you want to know the SEC coach this year that's truly under the most pressure, it's obviously Brian Harsin. Now, the only way in which that might not be true for him there at Auburn is if he's so at the end of his rope there that it's like you've heard the phrase that once all hope is lost, the only thing left is relief. Like maybe Harsin's just sort of let go. Like at this point in time, he's got nothing left to worry about. But in terms of a guy who's actually coaching for his job and coaching knowing that there are people with power and sway who don't want him to have that job, clearly Harsin's the guy with the most pressure. By the way, speaking of Harsin and Fisher, interesting to note that Zach Calzada, who was with Jimbo a year ago, helped lead A&M to the victory over Alabama, then transferred to Auburn. I think the buzz early camp was that Calzada would be the starting quarterback. If you pay attention to buzz coming out of Auburn as of late, that's kind of changed. It seems like TJ Finley's a much bigger part of this conversation. Maybe even Robbie Ashford's a little bit of a part of this conversation. And apparently Calzada's just not having a very good summer. So kind of file this away here a little bit. For high-profile transfer quarterbacks that don't end up starting after they transfer, very good chance that's what's going to happen to Jackson Dart at Ole Miss. It seems like it might also happen with Zach Calzada at Auburn. So just kind of keep that in mind there. We're talking about coaches under pressure, but the quarterback that played for both these guys, worth considering there too. Speaking of transfers, one of the big stories at Tennessee right now is the status of Brew McCoy. Now, McCoy's transferred by my count about half dozen times, but most recently at USC, went to Tennessee, and as of now, McCoy has still not gotten any kind of eligibility what do you call it? Like ruling on his status the upcoming year. And there had been some chatter that USC might be sort of blocking his release, which I think to some people kind of is a little bit of a bad look because USC's whole dadgum roster is transfers. Like, who are you to block somebody else's, release because he transferred more than one time? So by rule, he doesn't have like the free one-time transfer because he's used that 12 years ago. He transferred before he even enrolled in college, so he's transferred a gazillion times. So USC, I guess, is in some role of granting his release. They have come out and said, hey, we're not blocking his eligibility at all. We think he should be eligible, but somehow, some way, this is kind of grinding. In most cases, when a program does freely grant the release, the eligibility ruling from the NCAA is kind of a formality. All of this is kind of a mess. Tennessee needs another wide receiver just because they're certainly not going to stop anybody on defense. They're going to try to score as many points as they can. And McCoy's former 5-stars. This is not a small deal necessarily. But at Tennessee, they are still waiting to find out news on this. And one more, and once again, kind of a transfer-themed story. I guess you have a lot of that. So Quinn Ewers has been named starting quarterback at Texas. Now, this all goes down very strange. And if you kind of troll around in the message board world, there are a lot of rumors related to this, which I don't know what to say about one way or another. But just the way in which Ewers was announced as starting quarterback for Texas was very strange. This was like an official release from the team, like not a statement from Steve Sarkisian, which led some to wonder, is this Sarkisian's decision? Has the future that we all feared of boosters telling coaches who they're going to be starting, has this already begun? And that's why the SID's office is announcing Quinn Ewers as starting quarterback. In the subsequent time, Sarkisian has come out and sort of made his statement about why Ewers won the job, but you'll remember what the story on Quinn Ewers was. He was, Texas quarterback, high school kid who decided to forego his senior year, went to Ohio State for some imaginary sum of NIL money that was always grossly exaggerated. Then after being in Columbus for a year, sees how good the other quarterbacks are, including C.J. Stroud, comes back to Texas, been in a battle with Hudson Card, and apparently it's always kind of hard to know. Is it really a close quarterback competition, or do you just not want Hudson Card to transfer? I mean, we never quite know the answer to that, but it sounds like this one's at least been somewhat contested because Card himself is probably a decent little talent. But nonetheless, that very high-profile transfer back to the state of Texas to go to the University of Texas, Quinn Ewers, after having been in Ohio State, he has now been named as starting quarterback for the Longhorns, and this seemingly comes coupled with about as much drama as you assume it would for a program like Texas, who seems to be a drama factory about every single thing that he does, and will make that cruising around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. And before we fire up the music and close out the show, let me give you one more reminder that coming up on Thursday, special guest, special announcement. So at that point in time, we'll be 1 week away from a huge event there at Marlowe's Tavern to kick off the upcoming season. And that big event gets even bigger in just a couple of days. So we'll see you there Thursday, September 1st at the Marlowe's in Dunwoody. But I may not be the only name of note joining us for that big event. So stay tuned for a lot more on that. We'll have it for you there at that point in time. Speaking of big names, our buddy Mad Dog is among the biggest when it comes to golden shoe contributions. And boy, this is a good one here today. We told you about getting ready for Oregon a little earlier. He says when you're preparing for September 3rd, he says this on Twitter and sends the picture of Stetson Bennett bagging the limit, or at least coming close to that when it comes to bringing in all these ducks here. Yeah, you love the duck blind. You love Bennett there on that, showing off the UGA camo gear as he does so. Fresh new haircut there, too. So in true Staquavia style, Stetson Bennett getting ready to bring home a whole bunch of those trophy ducks there coming up here very, very soon. So good stuff from Mad Dog there on that. Congratulations to him. We'll make him a golden shoe winner once again. And our Gator Hater Update. How about the lousy stinking Gators? 4,975 days since they have won a national championship. Long time. Just 25 away from $5,000. That's kind of cool. And how about our Gator Hater Updater? 67 days from right now. Georgia back in Jacksonville, beating Florida again. We will see you tomorrow, DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia and on video. Time now for the R.S. Andrews cool down. So yeah, there you go, 67 days. The golden shoe looking good right there, shiny as ever. You love to see that. Adorned perfectly on the wall. So this is one of the things we're trying to do. So we're trying to get off the air by like 11:15ish. And to make the comment section be as good as it can be, we're trying to be done with the show by like, say, 10:50, 10:55, something like that. Maybe in a perfect world, it'd be 10:45, but not 11:05. Like, the shows are just so dadgum long. So we got to see if we can figure out how to tighten that up a little bit. So we'll do that on our end. How about that? My laptop is dead. Let me see if I can plug this in. I may have to read off my phone here for a minute. Hold on. All right, so I'll let this fire back up again because I didn't plug it in. Now it's dead. And I'll take some phone comments before we get there. All right, so your comments here today, and I hope you're all doing great. And give me just 1 second to kind of pull this up on the phone because this always takes just a little bit longer. All right, so there we go. Now let's see if we can get this going. On YouTube for a moment. All right, eventually we'll get there. All right. There we go. Now we're ready. YouTube comments here for a moment. Sorry for the delay, but I didn't plug in my laptop. All right, here we go. Matt Presley says, we want the show to go longer. Love what you bring each and every day. Matt, that's incredibly nice. I appreciate you saying that. I really do appreciate that. Thank you. Good to see Christy in the comment section here today. Andrew Hughes says, can we call Stetson 20 gauge after he shoots the ducks down? I like the idea of that. Frank Patterson also mentioning, and Mad Dog shared this with me too, so Florida's selling 2 upper-level North and South tickets to home games plus 2 hot dogs and 2 sodas at Costco for $59. They'd be better off selling gourmet hot dogs and throwing in the free tickets. What's funny is Costco's kind of famous for, I guess, selling their own hot dogs there too. But I did see they did have the deal at the big box retailer going on. That's not a great look. So yeah, I did notice that. A few teams are doing that. I guess South Carolina's doing that. This must be one of those things they're just sort of doing over there now because I did notice that. Phoneme Unit says, I still rock the iPhone 11. Yeah, I'm iPhone 11 all the way around. And I mean, before I had the iPhone 11, I had an iPhone 6. So I am not, super techie like some of the other folks are. I'm not. Christy says, tell everybody to black out the ATL for the opener. So I know there've been some chatter about this, but hasn't Georgia already said it's wearing red that day? Isn't that true? Didn't they already say they were wearing red? John White says, quit trying to get us out of here earlier, BA. This is the highlight of my workday. Well, that's awesome to hear. And if I could stay here all day long, that's definitely what I would do. Jay Shipes all over Jimbo Fisher. All over Jimbo Fisher. Saying that I'm doing this in exchange for cruise vouchers. I cannot be bought that easily. Which is not the same thing as saying I can't be bought. But I can't be bought that easily. Jessica Jones says, here's an interesting stat that Georgia's got 34 players who are former recruits ranked inside the top 100 as recruits, and Oregon's got 14. So that gives you an idea of the imbalance when it comes to talent there. Let's see what else. Phoneme says, I just upgraded to a 13 from an 8. Yeah, I mean, for work now, I do a little bit more videoing with my phone from time to time, and I sort of wish I had the better camera. It's amazing to me this is not an Apple commercial, but it's amazing to me, like the cameras on these things are so, even this old 11, this 11 is old and it's beaten up, but the cameras on these things are so good now. It's actually sometimes hard to get a video camera, like a true camera, to function as well as an iPhone camera will do. Like, bad lighting, the iPhone always makes it look a little bit better. It's a very sophisticated camera. Zebulon Owen said, I'd do almost anything for a long drink. Yeah, there you go on that, for sure. Christy says, the team can wear red, but the fans can wear black. I'm actually kind of pro-black gear anyway. I like wearing the black gear. I do. More often than not, if I'm buying my own UGA gear, I'm sort of leaning black anyway. So I'm more than happy with a blackout that day. More than happy. Chase Shipe says this A&M case. No, I used to not have any case on my phone because it's kind of bulkier. I was finally basically told I had to get one by both the people that I work with and my wife because I kept dropping it and smashing it. Foster Moss asking about SEC Country Live. We have some very cool SEC Country related announcements coming at some point in time. We do. Green Soldier says, how does this game end for Oregon in your mind? He says, do you think minus 17.5 is fair? He says, I think the minus 14 was about right because Oregon's got a very good roster. It's just year. So here's the thing: is I obviously think that minus 14 is better as a bet than minus 17.5 or 18 would be. Once you get above 17, you're above a real key number there. So the odds are you're asking Georgia to win that game by 3 touchdowns, which they could very well do. If I'm betting Georgia-Oregon, I'm betting team total under on Oregon, and I'm betting that pretty much whatever that number is. In fact, I have kind of been looking for that team total under and haven't seen it yet. But that would be my play on this game. It'd be team total under on that. And so yeah, that's kind of where I would go on that. Because to me, I'm not saying you shouldn't bet minus 18. I'm not. But other than the fact that my money is going to be tied up for such a long time, I'd almost, if I really like Georgia minus 18 against Oregon, I might just take the over 11.5 of the season. Because, if they're easily beating Oregon by that much, and I think they very well might, then they're probably coasting for the entirety of the year. So there you go on that. Eric Summer, I appreciate that. He says he watched the show twice most days. I appreciate that. Eric, thank you very much. Zebulon Owen says, who's the first to drop 50 on someone? That's a really good question. It kind of goes with something I sort of briefly touched on earlier, which is Ohio State against Notre Dame week 1, Georgia, Oregon week 1, Bama, Texas week 2. That's a real shot for the 3 top teams in the country to sort of send their message. Ohio State's a very big favorite over Notre Dame. Maybe they shouldn't be, but they are. Georgia's a very big favorite over Oregon. Alabama's going to be double-digit favorite at Texas. Texas is the weaker of those 3 teams, but it is a true road game for Alabama. So I don't know who gets 50 first between the big boys, but in terms of really sending a message with a very impressive score, I would say that Georgia has a chance to kind of do that big time. John White says he thinks Ohio State drops 50 on Notre Dame. So there you go. Big prediction there. Let me go to Facebook here for a moment. We'll get some comments over there. Yeah, there you go. That's my close-up of my phone. That's the American line. That's very funny. BlackBerry. Listen, you can laugh at Atari if you want to, but you better believe that I had the old Atari 7800. I remember that. Santa Claus brought the 7800 to my brother and me one time. That was a big deal. So, listen, I got no problem with the Atari 7800. No problem whatsoever. I also had at one point in time, I had a Coleco system too. All right, let's see if I can get these Facebook comments to get going here. All right, here we go. On Facebook for a moment. Gerald Harmon says, I'm so curious what Jermaine Burton's going to do in his first game in Alabama. There are a lot of Georgia fans who will be. It's one of those things where, you to a certain degree, you wish him well. To another degree, you can't wish him too well because he is playing for Georgia's arch nemesis, but that's going to be part of the conversation. Jesse Dellinger says, excited to see how Sewell's going to stack up against UGA. Yeah, this is one of those things where if you care about some of the Pro Football Focus numbers and things like that, Sewell's a good player, and one of the ways in which he's kind of measured to have been a very good player so far, PFF metrics, things like that, is a very good linebacker in pass coverage. So between he and Justin Flo, who's also there too, you'll remember that name, watching those linebackers maybe running with the Georgia tight ends, that could be a fun battle. Now, that's a hard deal for any linebacker, but seeing Sewell and Flo in pass coverage against some of these Georgia tight ends could be pretty interesting to see. Philip Jordan Wells says BlackBerry the Crackberry. I remember when that was all the rage. Crackberry was the thing that everybody was talking about, being addicted to their BlackBerry back in the day. I actually never had a BlackBerry though. When BlackBerries were popular, I had no need for that kind of thing. David Johnston, great to see you in the comment section here today. Demetrius Faison, looking forward to big numbers from Stetson Bennett. So there you go on that. Let's see what else. Todd Greer says he'd love to see the Irish upset the Bucks. I think Notre Dame's a very interesting team this season. Look, I don't mind telling you, I'm right there with anybody else who wants to say that Notre Dame is overrated every single year. I totally get that. I think they're overrated every single year. the one thing they did do well under Brian Kelly, you've heard me say this before, they didn't really lose to bad teams very much. Like they were 11-1 last year. The only game they lost in the regular season was they lost to Cincinnati. Cincinnati became a playoff team. They lost to Cincinnati. That's the only game they lost all year. Could they maybe really fired up about playing for Marcus Freeman? Could they maybe be more dangerous against Ohio State than like gamblers are giving them credit for? They could be. I mean, it's a pretty interesting game, and I think that Notre Dame surprised a lot of people when they came in at number 5 in some of the polls. But the truth is, they had a pretty good season a year ago. Let's see what else. Susan Levy, that's awesome to hear. Susan says that she loves to listen to the show while she works out as it helps me get through it much faster. See, that's what I love, Susan. And I'm telling you right now, like, this is why I wanted to do the show. And when we first invented the show, I never knew that we'd be available on as many video platforms as we are, because that's not really what the thing was back then. Back then it was just podcast. But I wanted people to have, earbuds in, exercising or trying to get some work done, or, put it in your car and, keep you company while you're driving down the road. Like, that's like what I want. Like, I want that thing of keeping people, company, whether either doing something that they, want to do, like exercising, or wish they didn't have to do, like working or fighting traffic in a commute, like whatever that thing is. I just want to be there for people during all of that. And the fact that I keep you company while you work out means the world to me. It really does. So thank you very much. Matt Rukavina says the Facebook broadcast has been all kinds of crazy today. What does that mean? Is that crazy commenters or something else crazy going on? Denise White Loper says, if Notre Dame beat Ohio State, it would ruin. Yeah, you're talking about like a seismic earthquake. Because don't forget, what was the thing at the NFL draft? Was it Freeman and Day on the what happened in the NFL draft? Was it Freeman and Day on the desk of the NFL Network together? Somehow the point spread became a big issue there, and it was like one of those things of, I think Freeman was there, and they're like, hey, you're big underdog, and he's like, oh, thanks for giving me that motivation. I forget what it was. Some of y'all have better memories than I do, but that was a thing going into that. Gerald Harmon says he listens to the show while welding in his job. You talk about, see, this is the other thing too. It's like, that's real work, right? Like, sitting here blabbing into a microphone, this is not what I think of as real work, because when I'm done, I haven't made anything. Like, if you're welding, you're making something. Like, something exists that didn't exist before. Two big pieces of metal are, connected now. That's real work. Like, if there was no welding, we wouldn't have bridges. We wouldn't have, think about all the stuff that wouldn't exist if we didn't have welding. So if you told me right now I could have welders listening to the show, I'll take that any day of the week. I just love the idea of people that do real work allow me to keep them company while they do that. Like, that's what I want this show to be about, is being there for people who are actually making something in life. And that is as big a compliment as I can ever get. Demetrius Faison's got Georgia 42-17 over Oregon. That's quite a statement. That'd be fun to see. Corian Hurd says, I drive for a living, so every morning I look forward to this broadcast. See, that's awesome, too. It's that thing there, too. I hear from truck drivers. I hear from couriers. I hear from, people who are, doing the ride service stuff. And, like, if you're in the car the entire time like that, that's your time, right? That's your headspace. And it's one of the reasons why, we try to take people's feedback on certain things seriously. It's because when somebody puts like an earbud in their ear, or, if you're driving, maybe you have it in your, car radio or whatever, like, that's a pretty intimate relationship, right? It's like, so we try not to, I don't know, we try to keep the show consistent, sort of sounding the same way, deliver it in kind of the same fashion each and every day, because that's a very big ask from someone to say, hey, let me go with you while you work and do that kind of stuff. So we try to do that right now. Look at Matt McCall. He's putting up a garage door while he's listening. See, that's amazing. That's awesome. I just love that kind of stuff. First of all, if you gave me 6 months, I couldn't put a garage door up. Not 6 months could I get that done. So the fact that we got go-getters and do-it-yourselfers and smart people in our audience, hard workers in our audience, I'll take that any day of the week. Oh, is Nick Saban whining about the start time now? Oh, is that the 11 a.m. thing for Texas? That's hilarious. I saw where he brought out more excuse making the other day. That's fantastic. Tyler Walker listens while painting every day. See, I love that. I love that. Like, that's real work. That's real, honest, hard work right there. And we are better for it when people do that kind of thing. All right, let me go to DawgNation.com for a moment. Let's see what else is going on over there. Here we go. On DawgNation.com. And it always takes a little longer to access this stuff from the phone. Although by now I've probably got enough of a charge I could do this. Hemingway's got Bama going 10-2. That wouldn't be too bad. How about? So this is cool. They told me this before, and I'd forgotten this. So a couple of our commenters, you may hear me mention the name Jacob Yarbrough and Cam Hasty. These are two very prolific commenters. They're also colleagues at work. He goes, my buddy Cameron Hasty and I listen every morning in our shared office. Just local government employees using their time wisely. There you go. See, I love that. It's always kind of cool to find out that the commenters know each other like that and are kind of there together. That's really fun. Ohio Dog listens every day at home as he processes mortgages. See, that's great. That's amazing. That's a really cool thing. Chadwick Ivory says, I'd love if the Dogs did shut out Oregon, but I don't think it happens in game one. Defense needs to gel and grow together. Yeah, like I'll totally admit that this is kind of one of those just sort of blowhardy things you say for attention. Like, I do think the Georgia defense is going to play really well, and it's more interesting to say shut out than like 9 points. So if I do get this right, I promise I won't go around, Vince McMahon strutting too much about it, because it's just sort of a more interesting way to say what I think is really actually the most truth, which is that I do think the Georgia defense plays well. And if you want to take this back to like sort of the gambling thing, for a moment, like maybe Georgia's not always super motivated to kind of punch in that extra score late, especially if it's against a coach like Lanning that Kirby knows and likes. But are they motivated to try to keep it off the scoreboard? Defensively, they've kind of been motivated to do that. And so I think even though that Georgia's kind of got a friendly face on the other sideline, they're going to still want to play defensively as well as they possibly can. Cam Hasty says, I'm adding that to my resume. DawgNation Daily prolific commenter. That's really funny. Brian Jones enjoys hearing from Jeff Sentell on Friday. Glad to hear that. Mike Gonier enjoys hearing from Terrence Edwards on Thursday. I'm glad to hear that too. Let's see what else. Hemingway's got, do we say 42-10 for him on that? Mike Gonier also says that teachers enjoy listening during their planning. That's good to hear. I'm glad to know that. I also hear from some teachers sometimes who are like, summertime live listeners and like, sort of like on-demand listeners the rest of the year. It's like from like June up until August, they're, here live every day. And then they're like, hey, I got to check out, got to get back to work. We also heard from a lot of teachers around our Dog Nation cruise last time because they're like, you had this during the school year, we couldn't go on the cruise. And so I always love hearing from our teacher folks because they're out there doing great stuff for us there too. So I love knowing those teachers are out there listening during that planning period or driving home or whatever else. Mike Gonier also says that all guys like wearing black because it makes the beer bellies look slimmer. I think that probably is true for me too. I think that's what that's kind of about, Mike. I think you're probably right. Let's see what else. Randy Hall asking about Eddie's new outfits. So we have some Eddie related announcements coming up sooner rather than later, and I'm actually not sure when I'm going to be able to make those. But we do have some cool Eddie related announcements coming up. All right, so I'm going to do one trip around the comment section, and then we're going to go for today. And I am, of course, way later than I said I would be. Let's see what else. Frank Patterson says, got to think the injury to AP combined with the lack of big running back recruiting for the 2023 class is concerning for next season from a depth and experience perspective, as two could get drafted again. Yeah, I mean, I could see Georgia thinking portal for 2023. I could see them doing that. I could. I mean, look, the fact is that Georgia took a pretty sizable loss in recruiting when Justice Haynes went to Bama. And I've talked to a ton of people who know this stuff way better than I do, and I don't mind saying it. And they were just as surprised as I was that Haynes did what he did, that it was just one of those things of, oh my gosh, you can't believe that happened. So when you don't win a recruiting battle that you sort of A, thought you would win, and B, kind of thought you needed to win, there are some ramifications to that. So, Georgia will now kind of pick up the pieces on that. It seems like they're in pretty good shape here in 2024. I think in future years, you've got a really good crop of in-state running backs going to be making a lot of names for themselves. I think there's a chance they may still think about an in-state running back from 2023, maybe. I get the sense that might be true. But, Haynes not coming to Georgia was a loss, and there are going to have to be some pieces picked up in the aftermath of that. That's true. Let's see what else. Foster Moss says, I listen to your show every day while I'm delivering, and I time myself by the show. I'm usually at the same stop every day by the time the comments start. That's really funny. So he says, hey, listen, I know how I'm doing on my day based on kind of where you are in the show, so that's kind of nice to know. I appreciate that, Foster. That means the world to me. Andrew Hughes says, if y'all need somebody to wear an Eddie suit, I'm available. So we do have an Eddie mascot like suit, and we've done it for things before. We have done that before. So you never know. We may break that again at some point in time. It's a little small. It's because it is a squirrel after all. So it's a little small, but we've done that before. All right, we got to get ready to go. Jerry Dogs fan says, I've helped my brother who paints plantation homes and a lot of old homes in Thomasville area. It's definitely an art. Yeah, listen, I love that. Like the people who are kind of like, restoring properties and things like that. That's one of the coolest jobs you can have. That's an amazing thing to be able to do, because when it's done, like you really have a trophy to show for your efforts. I just love that. I love that. Miriam says she likes to get out early and do some gardening with her earbuds. So there you go. We appreciate Miriam doing that. That's great to see. Barry Watkins predicting that Alabama won't win the SEC West. That is a very strong prediction. Very strong prediction. Great stuff. All right. Last comment going here. Dogs on Top says, how is Kirby Smart likely to run the score up on this season? I mean, see, for me, this is one of the things that we can always have a little bit of a difference opinion with some compared to others on, is that if you want more points from Georgia, I don't think it comes late in the game as much as I think it comes earlier in the game. What you do to extend your lead. And like an example that a year ago is that Georgia wasn't particularly great when it comes to touchdowns in the red zone. Obviously their overall scoring was not bad, 37, 38 points a game, something along those lines. But if you want to get into the 40s this year, that's kind of where you zero in on. Are you a little bit more aggressive in the red zone? If you really trust Stetson Bennett, we did a show on this the other day, that if you really trust Stetson Bennett, I believe that Georgia probably does, and I think that Georgia probably should. But if you really trust Bennett, turn him loose in the red zone. Don't run on first and second down when you're inside the 20. Don't take the safe points. Give him a chance to make something happen, especially with these tight ends that are such weapons down there when the field gets smaller. When you kind of play the game a little bit more in a phone book, let those guys do their thing. So if you want more, as you say, kind of running it up and putting a bigger point total up, it's the decisions you make in the red zone. That's where, and by the way, earning points when you do make a little bit of a more aggressive decision. I think that's where a lot of that kind of comes in. So that's really good stuff. Thank you all for being here for the comments. We appreciate that. We went a little longer today, so we'll see if we can try to keep the correct pace going for the rest of the week. But nonetheless, appreciate you being here. Y'all check out the AJC online, Atlanta Journal-Constitution, AJC.com. We were talking about this before the show began. Braves got a nice win in Pittsburgh last night. Odorizzi, a little bit better start. Makes you feel better about that. Michael Harris Jr. just continues to be about a 5-star freshman. I mean, that's what Harris has been for these Braves. He's got a good paycheck coming his way because of that, and I love to see that. Very happy about all of that. I was also telling our video audience before the show began on our 1st and 15 That Pittsburgh ballpark, man, it's just beautiful too. Gorgeous ballpark. A lot of fun. I love to see that. So make sure you check that out. Also, the Tour Championship coming up at Eastlake. Steve Hummer's got some good stuff on that. It's the playoff finale for the PGA Tour, and there's a bunch of money on the line at a gorgeous historic course here in Atlanta. So Hummer's got you on that. What's the future of Marcelo Zuna in a Braves uniform? Probably not much, but Mark Bradley's got a good column there on that. Also, some fun events as we head towards the fall. You can get that at ajc.com there as well. So a lot going on here on that. So make sure you check that out. And our friends at RS Andrews online, rsandrews.com for our air conditioning, heating, plumbing, electric needs. They show up on time. They do the work that's promised for the price that's promised. That is what RS Andrews will do for you today. So make sure you check them out there. Air conditioning, they'll get it tuned back up to factory fresh specs. Find them online at rsandrews.com. Y'all have a great day. We'll see you back here tomorrow for DawgNation Daily, presented by Engineered Solutions of Georgia. For all of you working hard, thanks for letting us join you as you do. We will talk to you tomorrow, everybody.